We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Oh boy. Okay, you guys, today is the day. Well, I don't know if you have any idea what that means, but today's the day my dad is on the podcast. My father, my paternal parent. I'm so excited. This conversation, I learned so much about him, and I was just fascinated, like as his daughter, but also just like as a person who has never been a pilot. But seriously, it's a really, really fun episode. And I'm so glad you're here because I know that like paring down flight anxiety is like a little different than paring down the clutter in your house. And so you're probably like, Shannon, is this what I really signed up for? And like, I get it, but we're going to spread our wings. Oh my gosh, no pun intended, but that worked perfectly. And we're going to talk about flight anxiety because as you guys know, I really do want to every once in a while in these mini series talk about paring down areas of our lives that might not necessarily, is that a double negative? Might not, no, that works. Might not necessarily be directly related to clutter, but I really want us to live intentionally, right? And just like pare down these different ideas and beliefs and struggles to get to the bottom of moving through life with more ease, more peace, and more intentionality. And for me, a big part of paring down travel is flight anxiety. Like, I'm so glad we had Kira on to talk about paring down what we bring with us to travel light. And I'm so glad that we brought Caroline on to talk about traveling with kids and making that part of travel a little bit more simple. But I cannot ignore flight anxiety because, listen, most of you guys know if you've listened to my podcast for a while that I am a woman of faith. I believe in God. I live a God-centered life. And that comes up sometimes, like right now. And still, during takeoff and landing, you better believe I'm trying to get right with God. I'm pretty sure I got it. Like, I'm pretty sure we're good. But I'm like triple checking during takeoff and landing. And so I can't talk about paring down travel without talking about paring down flight anxiety. And my dad is just the perfect person to do this with because he was a fighter pilot for the United States Navy. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 78. I hope I got that right. And then he went on for his second career. He became a pilot for FedEx, which is flying commercially. It's basically like the same thing as flying for like American or Delta, except instead of having people in the back, you have packages, which frankly is so smart. You don't have to deal with all the crazies. So, I mean, that's what I would do. So shout out to my dad for that decision. So anywho, he's the perfect person to talk to. He is so lovable. You'll love my dad because even though all fighter pilots have like a confidence that might lean towards cocky, my dad is like the anomaly. He is very confident and awesome. And you will obviously hear that, which you have to be if you're going to be flying freaking fighter jets all over the sky upside down at a million bajillion miles per hour. But he's also just the most down-to-earth, wonderful, lovely human. He loves musicals. So growing up, most of you guys know I was a professional vocalist back before I did the many careers that I have fallen into. But I'm a singer and I get that from my dad. Well, my mom, she could definitely carry a tune, but she was like not getting on stage. But my dad, he would do musicals with me growing up. In fact, we were both the understudies in Annie. So he was understudy for Daddy Warbucks and I was understudy for Annie back in, I think it was like 1998. And fun fact, actually, the girl I was understudying for who played Annie, she went on to win the Tony for Best Actress in a Musical on Broadway like 2 years ago. Adrienne Warren, she was Annie way back when with me, and then she did play Tina Turner in Tina Turner the Musical. So among many other amazing things, she's actually, I think she's won 2 Tonys at this point, but won, the big one was Tony, the Best Actress Tony in a musical. Anywho, I will stop name dropping now. The point is that my dad and I loved doing musical theater together growing up, and I'm already way off track from travel anxiety or flight anxiety, because I could just talk about my dad all day. I'm just so excited for you guys to fall in love with him, and for you to hopefully get some really practical and helpful information that will help you pare down your own flight anxiety from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. So without further ado, here's my dad, Captain J.D. Oliver. Okay, Dad, I'm so excited that you're here, because I've already amped you up in an introduction to the people to tell you how cool that you are. But I just think it's so fun to have you on. I already talked to Aaron, which you know. So this is my second family member on the podcast, which is, getting pretty personal.
Well, am I allowed to call the host honey?
I guess, yes, you sure can, Daddy. Oh, aren't we cute? Okay, so Dad, why don't you tell the people an overview of who you are, what you do? It can really just be anything that you want the people to know.
Well, okay. I've had 2 careers in aviation. One as a fighter pilot in the Navy, and I was a Top Gun grad and that kind of thing back in the day. And then did a second career flying freight around for FedEx. So the joke went that I traded in my sports car in the sky for a 18-wheeler in the sky.
It's the perfect analogy.
Two fun careers, and obviously got three great children now, that kind of thing. So,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. Kids. When you first asked me to come on, I said maybe I should pare down from 3 children to 2.
Hey, come on! I'm your only daughter. Thank goodness.
That's right.
Honestly,
That's right.
When my dad and my stepmom told us that they were pregnant, and they asked if. I don't even know if you guys asked if we cared if it was a boy or a girl, but I immediately was like, it better not be a girl. I want to be Dad's only little girl. And luckily, my little brother is in fact a boy.
Yeah.
Anywho, okay. And by the way, people, my dad's name is JD, so you don't have to call him Dad too in your head. This is JD Oliver, the man, the myth, the legend. Okay. So Dad, we're paring down travel today. As you know, I like to do these mini series on the podcast where we go a little bit deeper on a subject to figure out, just to make our lives easier, I guess would be the simplest way of putting it. And so when it comes to travel, I personally have so much flight anxiety. I get nervous. And I know I've asked you questions in the past, and it always makes me feel better to hear answers from somebody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to airplanes. So I'm hoping today to offer people who struggle with flight anxiety just how to kind of pare that down and reel it in a little bit. So let's start with your background, though. So how did you know that you wanted to become a pilot?
Well, you never really know, but it was Space Race was still on when I was a kid, and they were always talking about going to Mars. So I had always wanted from the time I was a tweener to be the first man on Mars. Obviously, that didn't quite work out, but I followed that enough to actually start learning to fly when I was 15.
Because in order to become an astronaut, you have to be a pilot. Is that right?
Correct. Or at least, you would have had to. Yeah. We have astronauts that are called mission specialists that are not pilots, but there's always 2 pilots like on the space shuttle and that kind of thing. So, and almost all of them went back through test pilot school. So I actually did a career where I kept that option open. And I went to test pilot school after my first F-14 fleet tour. And, but I never decided to go to never applied to be an astronaut. In fact, I was the only pilot in my whole class at test pilot school that never did apply to NASA. And I decided that I really liked being out there flying jets off aircraft carriers instead. So.
Okay, so what made you change your mind, though? Like, why did you not apply if that was your initial intent?
Well, because clearly we weren't going to be sending a man to Mars during my lifetime. It was technologically, it wasn't working out. And if you're going to be an astronaut, you're really more of a flying engineer. And, the only flying you do is when you take the little airplanes they have around to give Elks Club speeches somewhere. Or the idea that you're actually doing the mission flying isn't really there. So it just no longer appealed to me because the romance that I thought it was when I was a kid turned out not to be the reality.
Interesting. Look at you already like thinking things through for your future at such a young age. I don't think I would have had such forethought. I would have been like, I'm going to Mars, people,
Yeah.
no matter what. Oh, wait. So we need to back up though. Okay. So when did you get your pilot's license? Because this is
Okay.
absolutely insane information.
Well, I
to
actually,
me.
I bought, when I was still 15, I bought a tenth of a airplane, a Cherokee 140 Piper Cherokee, and got flying lessons. I worked at the airport as like filling airplanes with gas and waxing them and stuff, and got flying lessons in return. This had all been set up for me by my chemistry teacher. She was a pilot there. And so I soloed on my 16th birthday, which is the day you're allowed to solo. I went out and soloed there in Honolulu. We lived in Honolulu at the time. And then shortly after I turned 17, when I was out at Caltech for a year of college there before I went to the Naval Academy, I got my full pilot's license, private pilot's license then. So
okay, Dad, I have so many questions. Wait, before you keep going, this is honestly creating more questions than it's answering at this point. So rewind. I didn't know about this chemistry teacher, a female pilot, which seems really cool to me, especially I feel like back in the 70s.
Well, this was 1972 is when I turned October 72 is when I turned 16.
Okay, so super cool. How did you afford to buy an airplane at age 15?
I had always worked as a paper boy, summer job, shoveling chicken manure at the golf course, those kinds of things. And in those days, it was a lot cheaper. My buy-in was $900
for your own airplane.
For a tenth of an airplane, yeah. And then you signed up with the other people that own it or when you're going to fly it, and you had to pay an extra $10 an hour or something or other for gas and oil and and upkeep, that kind of thing.
Literally the coolest thing ever. Okay, next question that I have is, what in the world was Lala thinking? I'm sorry. Listen, I try not to have an opinion on parenting before I know what I'm doing because I've never parented a teenager. However, I cannot foresee letting my 16-year-old fly their own airplane by themselves over a large body of water from one island of Hawaii to another. Like, to me, I think that's just going to be a boundary I hold. Well, so tell me more about Lala. Like, was she freaking out?
She's afraid of flying herself, so she always would have an old-fashioned and a Xanax before she got on an airplane. And it's why when we moved to Europe and when we moved to Hawaii, in fact, we actually moved by taking a cruise liner to get there instead of an airplane. Back in those days, that was more common. And but the time that I took Lala went up flying with me, my mother, at one time, and she felt actually a lot better about it because she's sitting there right next to the pilot. She can see what's going on. She didn't feel like she's just stuck in the back of this tin can, with no say in her life. So it was interesting that the one time I took her out, she really didn't freak out at all.
Wait, you took her out when you were a teenager?
Yeah, I was at the academy. I think I was probably 18 years old. We went flying from a little airport there in Annapolis where you could rent airplanes.
Okay, but before that, when you flew by yourself on your 16th birthday, she had never flown with you. And Did she just say see you later, bye? Did she know you were going, or was it a secret?
Her exact words to my dad were, "There goes our little boy." So,
stop. Lala, bless her heart. But she let you live. So wait, you literally flew over the ocean, from one island to another, right?
Oh yeah, including at night. In those days, they didn't have the navigational instruments. You basically pointed it the correct direction, and you timed the watch, and until Maui showed up underneath you.
Stop it.
Yeah, I mean, they had what they called VORs, like little radio beacons, but you wouldn't even see them until you were 20 or 30 miles away from the radio beacon.
I mean, truly though, you land on another island at age 16 at night. Then what do you do? I mean, you're not even old enough to rent a car.
No, sometimes I would stay at the airport there and have a little, just stay overnight at a motel and then, come back the next day. Sometimes on Apale near a resort, they have an airstrip there. You can land your airplane and go down and hang around the resort for a while. So if we had friends that were visiting, that were vacationing, sometimes I'd fly to wherever they were to see them. So.
Oh my gosh. This is the coolest thing ever. And also just so ridiculous. Okay. So did you always know, because Pop-Up was in the Navy, that I know you said you wanted to go to NASA, but did you know you were always going to take the Navy route to NASA?
Yeah. Since Dad was a Naval Academy graduate and a career naval officer, even though he wasn't a pilot, I always knew it was the Navy way I was going to go.
Okay. And then how long into the Naval Academy, what is the process of becoming a fighter pilot? Because you ended up flying F-14s, right?
Yes. So you first have to go to regular flight school, and that lasts for about 2 to 2.5 years. of everything from ground school to flying small propeller airplanes to then flying trainer jets, basic trainer jet, and then advanced trainer jet, learning to land on an aircraft carrier, learning how to do gunnery, those kinds of things. So it's a fairly long process. And then when you're done with that, you go to a training squadron specifically for F-14s. So even when you show up then at F-14 world, it's another year there of learning just the F-14 before you actually get assigned to a combat squadron.
Okay. So landing on an aircraft carrier. Let's go there. My anxiety is, I'm sweating thinking about it. Okay, the first time, I mean, do you do a lot of simulations? Like, how do you land on a boat?
Yeah.
What?
They actually start by painting a carrier deck on a runway and having the landing signal officers and having the little special lens that tells you whether you're high or low, the lighting system. And you just go around the pattern. You keep practicing landing each time that you come around. And unlike landing an airliner or something where you flare so that you touch down softly, all Navy jets are designed so you just keep coming down at the same rate until you collide with the ground, basically. And they're built strong enough to take that, because you can't be precise enough if you're trying to flare and land softly.
That sounds insane. So the first time you landed on an aircraft carrier, like, what was that like? I don't even know how to ask that question.
Oh, it's great. It takes about 2.5 seconds from when you touch down till the wire that has been caught by your tailhook stops you. And then the other side of it, when they catapult you off the front of the ship, that's about 2.5 seconds from going from 0 to flying speed as well, as it shoots you down the catapult. So we used to say that daytime, it was an e-ticket at Disneyland. This was in the days when you had to have you had different tickets to get on different rides at Disneyland. E-ticket was for the really good rides, and we enjoyed that. But at nighttime, it was maybe not quite as much fun, especially as I got older and realized that that it was pretty dangerous. So that's joke where I got all the gray hair was in my 30s.
Yeah, because by that point, your beautiful daughter was born and
Right.
son, your two oldest kids. And so you're probably like, maybe dying isn't the greatest thing. Okay, so tell me like the scariest time you've ever had to land. I'm assuming it's an aircraft carrier. I think I know this story.
Yeah, I had it once where there's a little duct that brings the really hot air out of some of your hot air out that's not getting blown out the back of the jet. And they use it to drive air conditioning systems and other things, and pressurization, those kinds of things. And that duct ruptured. So it started throwing all this really hot air, mostly into the back seat, my back seat, or my goose back there, my radar intercept officer. And of course, it always happens when you're blue water ops. That means we're out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. There's nowhere to divert to land on a regular field. You're going to have to come back to the carrier. And so it starts burning up all my electronics. So I start losing like my attitude indicator and this kind of stuff. And of course, it's nighttime. It's always nighttime. So I get back there and we get lined up on the ship and they're talking me in. And my Rio is saying that if you don't get this thing on board, I'm going to jump out. They actually could do it where the Rio could eject just himself in the canopy and leave you driving a convertible.
He's the backseater.
He's the backseater, and so now I'm in the middle of an argument with him that no, you're not jumping out of this airplane.
Oh my gosh, you're like, I'm trying to land in the middle of the Indian Ocean at night. I can barely breathe, and now I have to like tell my backseater to not eject.
Right. So when we got down there, it's funny. There's 4 wires that they put on the deck. You can catch any of the 4, but the target is to catch the third of the four wires, just so you have the most safety as you go over the back of the edge of the ship. But the landing signal officers, they kind of let you know. They go, okay, don't climb, and that means you got it made here. So I landed right in the first wire to make sure that I really got stopped on that first try, and still got a good landing grade, even though I didn't catch the wire you're supposed to.
Dad, it totally tracks that after the end of that wild story, you are worried about your landing grade. Like, to me, that totally makes sense for you. It's
my other quick story on that attitude, which is correct, is I ran into a turkey buzzard once at a couple thousand feet over Mississippi. And
what do you mean a turkey buzzard? Like a turkey?
A big vulture, big vulture.
Okay, like a bird, like a legitimate, like a real literal bird.
Huge bird, okay. Yes. And it just smushes all over my windshield. Luckily, it didn't come through the windshield because it hit like the little metal side of the windshield there, the stanchion. And the only thing that went through my mind was sound cool on the radio.
You're
and
like,
so then you just go,
don't.
hey, approach control. This is this is whatever, who 211, and we're we had a turkey strike here, and I'm gonna need a instrument approach back in because I can't really see very well out the front of the airplane.
Because I can't see because there's a dead turkey on
because
my
there's
windshield.
a big smushed turkey all over the
Wait, talk to me about why it wouldn't have come through the windshield. I'm hoping that that's not an option. Is
because
there a crack in the windshield?
The windshields have your front windshield has on either side of it is held in like a metal frame, and then side windshields, and then the canopy itself. So luckily, it hit one of the metal frame thing more of the center, took most of the impact. It cracked the windshield, but it didn't go through it.
Oh, if you had a turkey in the face while flying, Dad.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around it. Okay. I'm totally getting off course here because there's just all of this is so interesting to me. But I have more questions about your background, and I'm not going to stop because if I'm this interested, there's no way people listening aren't also this fascinated. So, you were an instructor at Top Gun. So I have two questions on that.
Yes,
Tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more, just period. That's my first question.
Okay.
Second question is, why aren't you in the movie? Because I know you were supposed to be.
Okay, so let's take the first question, which is I was not an instructor at Top Gun. You go to Top Gun to learn to be an instructor when you go back to your squadron. You're becoming the expert on air combat maneuvering, that kind of thing. So I was chosen during our cycle to be the one crew, me and my Rio, to go through Top Gun, which lasts for, I think it lasted for 7 weeks at that time. Okay. And then when I went back and became the training officer in my squadron, the guy that was teaching other people how to train there. But I was not a Top Gun instructor. That's
okay, but still, different. So you went to Top Gun basically because you were the best in your squadron.
Yes, basically.
I mean, I'll say that for you, Dad. I know you're still kind of being humble about it, but this was a long time ago, and you were the best in your squadron, and you went to Top Gun. So that's epic. And at this time, Top Gun the movie was not out. In fact, while you were at Top Gun, wasn't it filming?
Actually, no, they filmed right after I went through Top Gun, and then it came out a few months later. It was actually fairly quick from filming to release. It's not one of these things that took 2 years. So yeah, when they were filming it, we were just getting ready to go on cruise, and they wanted to get all the extras for like a week to do things like the love and feeling at the officers club, and those kinds of things. And so they had assigned a guy who had been a pilot but was going on changing career paths, didn't want to be a pilot anymore. And so he was in charge of getting all these extras together while he was waiting for his next assignment. And he had been a classmate at the Naval Academy, John Semkin, nice guy. And he's called me up and along with a bunch of other people and said, hey, you want to do this? And you got to take a week off and, leave. And I said, I just can't. I'm just too busy to do this thing, And now I'm kicking myself because he's always like right behind Tom Cruise and Anthony Edwards, along with the other people I know. Bob Staffney, in fact, even got a credit as a dialogue consultant because he was always feeding Jerry Bruckheimer with the things like "I feel the need for speed," that kind of stuff. So it was pretty fun. Big happening when it happened there.
Dad, listen, I am proud of you for pretty much every part of your life, but I am very disappointed in you for that decision.
Didn't go for my 15 minutes of fame. So I do have up there all pictures of me like shooting missiles and my commissions in the Navy and that kind of stuff. So.
The coolest, Dad. Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we'll move on from the Top Gun stuff. I do want to say to the people that I have had the honor of flying with you. And I even got to, I like to say I flew an airplane because you let me use the controllers to make it go up and down. And it was so fun. Dad took me, how old was I, Daddy? Maybe 13 or was I older?
I think around there, yeah. I didn't do a whole lot of flying small airplanes after I went in the Navy, and because it's a bunch of money, and for me it's like riding around in a Volkswagen, like, so what,
just so casual. But you did always want to make sure that you flew your kids. Right. And so we were living in Virginia Beach, where you still are, and we flew down to Nags Head, down the North Carolina coast.
Look at our beach house from the air there. Yep.
Yeah, I'll never forget it. It was so much fun. And I also got to go on a Tiger cruise on your aircraft carrier when I was little. And how many days was I out there? For 7 days? They don't have families do that.
You came all the way back from you and your brother both came all the way back from Hawaii to San Diego on the ship. And in fact, I actually flew off the last day, took the airplanes off the afternoon before the ship pulls in, then the next morning. So it was kind of funny to be down there and greeting the ship because my 2 kids I left behind on it.
You left us with your junior officers, right?
Yep.
Just be like, go.
You knew where the food was at that point, so
I was like 6 years old.
you're 8. You're 8.
I was 8. Still, that's hilarious.
Jim was 10. Yep.
Oh my gosh. What a time. Okay. So let's start with some basics of kind of travel anxiety that those of us who didn't start flying to Hawaiian Islands at the age of 16 might feel. Yeah. Let's start with the basics of like, why shouldn't we be scared of turbulence?
Okay. Turbulence is just where 2 rivers of air meet. So they kind of like, just like a stream does as it goes up past a rock, it creates a little burble there, you see. So, but the airplane doesn't really care about that. It's basically saying, maybe you decelerated real quickly because the 2 rivers of air have a slightly different, at a level you go from one flow into the other one. So you get that little jump. And but normally it's not all that bad. And the airplane can't overstress itself really at the speeds that we fly the airplanes. Almost no matter what happened with the turbulence, it might really throw you around and throw some people against the ceiling. But it can't really break off the wings because the wings would actually stall. The airflow would stall before it got enough force to actually break a wing if you went through bad turbulence. So it's not really something that you should be scared of, other than you got to have your seatbelt on when you're flying so that you don't get bounced off the roof. That's your biggest danger, is that.
Right. Okay. Full disclosure, and you'll be disappointed in me because I know that you are so good at math and physics and I am not, but I don't really understand what you just said. All I know is that the wing is not going to break off, and that makes me feel better. And I definitely trust you.
Good.
And it's not going to send you like it. So, cause when you're obviously to us as little human beings, we just feel like we're being thrown every which direction. So generally speaking, turbulence isn't going to like make them lose control of the airplane?
No. I've had it bad enough where it knocked my autopilot off. You're just cruising along chatting, and all of a sudden, you hit a big bunch of it, and the airplane says, "Hey, I can't keep on altitude tight enough for us right now. So you need to take over for a minute until this goes away." So it'll kick off your autopilot. But other than that, no big deal.
Okay. Is it a bigger deal in smaller airplanes?
It could be a bigger deal in a small airplane, but their biggest problem is when they get behind a big airplane, it's the jet wash from somebody's engines that they accidentally fly through or something. That's what really causes the problems for the small airplanes more than natural wind issues.
Okay, because you remember like when we would go to Wyoming on family vacations and we'd have to take that teeny tiny airplane every year, and I dreaded it because I was like, this is going to be the end of my life at age 11. That turbulence was probably the craziest turbulence of my life. And it was a small, like, I mean, maybe 10 people on that airplane. Yeah. Was that a concern?
Not really, except during landing. If it's still, very tough on, landing, it's tougher with a small airplane to keep it all nice and set it down just at the right moment when you're not getting rocked, left or right. And sometimes you just have to go like, I need to go around and try this and get it set up again because, it just was too rough at the moment I was about to set it down. And that's called a go around, or, in the Navy, we called it a wave off. And so sometimes you just have to do that. Nobody's ever forcing you to land. You can always go around and try it again. That's a great motto that pilots like to live by.
Yeah. When we lived in Ketchikan, Alaska, just a couple of years ago, it's pretty common for you to, and this happened to me once, and I bawled in the air. I was also pregnant. So I wasn't in my right mind entirely, but I was coming back from a bachelorette party. I was 7 months pregnant, also not a great combination. And we flew the 2 hours from Seattle up to Ketchikan, and it was really turbulent. And the pilot goes, "We're not landing. We're turning right around and going back to Seattle." And I had a mental breakdown in the sky because I could see our house and the children, right? And I was like so tired, and I just wanted to be home, and my home was right there. And I was like, can I just parachute out of here at this point? Like, I don't want to go back to Seattle. And so, I know that is a thing, like that.
Yeah, there are wind limits, like how much crosswind can you have? And most of the big jets are limited to around 30 knots of crosswind. So if you happen to have somewhere like Ketchikan where there's only one runway and you have a very strong wind that's coming from 90 degrees out one way or the other, it may just be that they are beyond the crosswind limit. It's not necessarily turbulence as much as it is crosswind. And but that's why they're smart enough to put all the gas on there to have it be able to come all the way back to Seattle. Normally, you wouldn't want to fly with extra gas, that much extra gas, because it's just, it costs you to carry that gas around.
Sorry if you heard our dog just then.
Okay.
My dogs have decided, I think they know that I'm talking to you. My dogs are obsessed with my dad, you guys, like both of them, but particularly Noma. And this is the first time I've had a problem with dogs barking during the podcast, and both of them have lost their minds. But anyways, they just must sense that you're nearby, Daddy. It's good to know that there's limits and that there's like rules surrounding this. And it's not just like the pilot being like, I think I can do this. Like, I think I can land in this wind. And that brings me to, why is like takeoff and landing so much more dangerous than just like flying at 30,000 feet, which is the part that kind of feels scary.
Because you can't collide with other air, but you can collide with the ground. That's basically it.
That sums it up. And also the pilot at that point is not an autopilot, right? Like, this depends on being a good pilot, is takeoff and landing.
Correct.
Right?
For example, all takeoffs are made by hand, and you can't even connect the autopilot until you're at 1,000 feet minimum. For Boeings and for pretty much all airliners. It is different landing wise. Sometimes you can actually be coupled up and land completely hands off, especially in really bad weather, bad visibility, that kind of thing. So I've landed airplanes where I didn't really actually do anything other than monitor the whole system, but.
Interesting. And that reminds me that I haven't even asked you, okay, when you started flying commercially, what you call the 18-wheelers in the sky versus the race car in the sky, for FedEx, what airplanes were you flying? And it's basically the same thing as being able to fly like for Delta or American. It's just you have packages instead of people.
That's correct. And so they take out all the seats, and the whole interior of the airplane has these rollers on the floor, so they can take these big cans full of packages and roll them on and roll them to the back of the airplane, and like a big Pez dispenser. And
but your training's not any different than someone who's flying a
exact same training, exact same license, exact same type ratings, they call it. So I flew 727s and 757s during my time at FedEx.
And are those Airbuses or
those are Boeings? I'm sorry, those are both Boeings.
Those are both Boeings. Dun, dun, dun. But we're not going to get to that quite yet. Okay, so thank you for answering all that about wind and takeoff and landing and all of that. That's very interesting. Let's move on to safety. I heard this one. This is like kind of a random thing I've heard, but that like nosediving might not mean you're crashing. It might mean the pilot has made a decision and they need to get to lower altitude. Is that true? Like, if my airplane starts nosediving, do I need to start like getting right with God and saying prayers for my family?
You'll know the difference between out of control and just a controlled descent, rapid descent.
Will I?
You would. When you lose for example, pressurization, you don't want everybody passing out back there. So, you have to get down to below 10,000 feet, which is the safe level to have an unpressurized airplane. And you've got to do it right away. So that's a no joke, as quick as you can. You put out all the speed brakes and everything and go down as steep as you can go without over speeding everything all the little brakes that you're putting out. You don't want to over speed stuff. But that's the idea, to get down as fast as possible that way. And the same idea, if you actually have a fire on an airplane, the biggest thing you can do is get the airplane on the ground as quick as you can. So one of the training items we would do every other year or so at FedEx, when we were in our simulators doing our requalifications, is catch on fire, and then they would time you to see they start the fire same time that everyone else had it that year, and then they have this sort of a contest of who can get it on the ground in Indianapolis the fastest, kind of a deal. So.
Sounds like a grand time.
Yes.
So basically, if the air mask drops or if there's a fire, don't be surprised if the airplane also starts going down.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Safety checks. What kinds of safety checks generally do planes go through? Do you feel like as a whole it's enough and they are safe? Because I know like the Boeing thing has freaked people out recently. Me.
Oh yeah. There's different phases that different times, everything from an annual to to after every flight, the mechanic has to walk around the airplane, just to give it a look-see, just like the pilots walk around before they start the engines up to make sure that everything looks like it's put together correctly. And but a lot of times these things have to go for C checks, they'll call them, and the airplane goes away for 2 months down to some facility, and I think ours was down in Mobile, Alabama, and the airplanes get all torn apart and looked at and refurbished as necessary and that kind of routine. So they do a lot. I think the biggest difference, though, is, and where people don't understand, is how mechanical problems are handled. And the airlines tend to not want to say what is wrong with the airplane. Well, we're having a mechanical issue or something. And I think they're going to make people more scared. Where I kind of go from the other viewpoint is, I think people would get rid of their anxiety if you just fess up to them a little bit more about what we're looking at. And on an airplane, unlike you can get in your car and something doesn't work, I can go fly with this. Pilots are not allowed to make that decision. If anything is wrong with the airplane, you have to write it up, and it has to be on a list of things that can be deferred until later. And they actually have to come do the paperwork on that. So they have to get a mechanic there to look over your shoulder about that and decide. So that's why it takes so long. And some of the times that it's taking forever, it's just for some little light bulb or something like that. But that's how safe they want to be, that everything has to be written up and everything has to be signed off as ready for safe for flight before that airplane goes. And it's why if you have anything go wrong, it seems like it always takes minimum of an hour before that airplane finally loads up and takes its passengers anywhere.
I mean, it's good to know, like, better safe than sorry. I'd rather sit on the ground for a long time than get in the air and something terrible happen. So,
right.
So then, like, I know you don't have all the answers, but like, how then does something like the Boeing door flying off happen?
Well, that wasn't just a day-to-day thing. That was something that when the air plug, as they call it, it's basically you could put a door there, and they decided not to. They decided, just to permanently plug it up. And then but all that's hidden behind, then the interior of the airplane, the wall of basically your airplane and where your seats are. So if somebody does that way off long before passengers ever get on it and just leaves it that way, nobody knows about it. There's no way to see it. So the problem there is it's quality control. And this was in fact, the Boeing thing, the most recent one with the air plug, that was it was a company that Boeing had hired to do some of the work. I mean, it wasn't really even Boeing themselves.
It was a contractor.
Yeah,
so
it's scary,
that's quality control from the get-go, from like
right.
the time the plane was built.
Right.
So okay, I could go on to like all the details of like every weird thing that's happened on an airplane. Like I remember that Southwest one where that window blew out and that woman passed away. Like terrible things like that. Like
it happened on Hawaiian Airlines at one point.
Did it? And that kind of thing. I mean, is that from the get-go build too, or are those just safety checks that need to happen, or like why?
Yes, you would think it's quality assurance. I can't tell you that nothing bad would ever happen. I mean, it's easy to point to the statistics about how safe you are, relatively speaking, getting in an airliner. But that I know that doesn't allay everybody's fears. This is one where the regulators have to go in and make sure that the company has not started slipping in its quality control. And that's what I think they're doing with Boeing now. And Boeing's taking a big financial hit for it, of course.
Yeah, I mean, as they should, frankly.
Yep.
So, but hopefully it'll all like lead to better results, right? Hopefully it'll get their quality control under control, and these kinds of things won't happen because they learned the hard way, but they shouldn't have had to learn the hard way to begin with.
My point is, when the pilot says, we're going to have to sit here for a few minutes, I have I got a mechanic coming away. It's not like, the wing almost just fell off and the guy's going to come tighten the screw. No, I mean, trust me, 99% of the time, this is something extremely minor, but that he is forced to have somebody come look at it, and he is not supposed to tell the passengers
what it is. Okay, that does make me feel better. Policy. That it's probably just a light bulb. I'm going to tell myself that every time. It's a light bulb. Okay, so you've explained to me before safety ratings, because there are certain safety ratings that like airlines, like United States Airlines versus international airlines. What are those safety ratings all about, and what are they?
Yeah, they do have organizations that have ranked all the different airlines worldwide. You're not really going to have to face this as an issue on a regular kind of traveling. All the major European airlines, all the American lines are all class 1. that you're have no problem doing it. It's when you start getting to regional airlines in China, for example. China Southern is a famous one. And in fact, it's written into the contracts for a number of our airlines that when the pilots are having to be positioned to somewhere else, that they can't put them on one of these airlines that isn't a Class 1 safe airline. So
interesting. Okay, so generally speaking, if I'm on a major airline, I'm fine.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the name of the things. It's kind of like, you go to Seat Guru if you want to know what kind of seat you're going to have, and how good is it, and what's the best place to sit on this airplane. There's also a couple of websites that basically have that list all the time. You can look up, weird airlines you haven't heard before and find out whether or not how they're ranked and how they're reviewed for comfort as well as for safety. So.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing that. I haven't told you this, but I am thinking about going with my bestie Emily and her daughter with JoJo to a Taylor Swift concert overseas.
Oh, okay.
So, just making the wisest choices with our finances. And anyways, so we will not be flying on, we don't know what airline, but this is making me think, I'm like, I want to make sure that if we are flying into a random country that I'm on a Class 1 airline for sure. Okay, when we see our pilots on the airplane, we're getting on and we see a young buck, right? He looks 25 years old. Do I need to be scared?
No, strangely enough, the only ones you should take a hairy eyeball at are an old guy that's on a little regional jet. Because how come the old guy never made it to the big time, to the regular airlines? Did he have some training issues, this kind of thing? So that's the only one that I would look at and go like, wonder what was wrong with that guy. But
okay. That's actually
or that gal.
Really good to know. Or that gal. Yeah. That's okay. Good to know. Speaking of specific kinds of pilots, I always go to the very famous incident when Captain Sully landed in the Hudson River. Mm-hmm. Okay. I watched the movie. I thought it was amazing. Would you have done what Sully did?
Yes, absolutely. We don't train for that very much. Now we do now. Every couple of years, everybody has to do ditching after what happened with Sullenberger. But, they said, well, if you made an incredibly quick decision, he might have been able to glide it into Teterboro. Yeah, and he might not have too. And he said, I know a nice big flat thing I can land on right now, and people might get a little wet, but they're all going to survive it. And and that's what he did. So, that was absolutely the right decision, as opposed to betting everybody's lives that maybe I can glide it all the way to Teterboro Airport. That's nuts.
Right. I don't want to land in the Hudson River, but I also am so impressed that he did so. How did the airplane not sink? Like, once he was able to get it perfectly aligned, like skimming the top. So, and then how did it not just sink?
No, because it's full of air, just like anything is, and it really takes a while for the water to kind of start seeping through little cracks or little rivet holes or whatever to start filling it up. So, ditching, everybody knows you're going to have a fair amount of time to get out. But I guess they had a little bit of a problem in that the one door you don't want to open up is the one in the very back, because that one would open up and fill in a little bit more. You want to go out over the wings, and so they did have a little problem with a couple of passengers, I guess, panicking and opened the back of it, and it started sinking quicker than it would have. But normally it's not a big deal, and you just manage to not hit a ship or boat while you're landing on the water there, and there's no waves really on the Hudson, so it's pretty darn flat, nice place to land. And it's just
oh my gosh, I just can't imagine being in New York and being like, is that airplane? Is that gonna happen? And then they land in the Hudson. I would be like, what? That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Okay. And last question before I do want to pick your brain very shortly at the end about some of your paring downness when it comes to retirement, because you've just impressed me so deeply with that. But what is the most important quality you think a pilot can have or should have?
Calmness when things are going to hell. And if I can remember once when, it was maybe my 34th birthday or something or other. So you were just a little kid. And we had an explosion near our house, and I called 911, and I said, we just had an explosion nearby. Oh, we sure it wasn't like a car backfire? And I go, no, this was like an actual high explosive bomb that went off, well, okay, and I tried to explain, I'm a Navy guy. I drop bombs, I've done this. So anyway, they said, okay, fine. So I went outside, everybody's out there, and I told everybody I've already called 911. We look around, sure enough, somebody has blown up a mailbox with a pipe bomb. And so it was 10 minutes until they arrived, a policeman arrived, and he says, okay, folks, what's going on? And I said, see those 4 little things coming out of the ground? That used to be a mailbox. Well, the next thing you know, we had, 5 fire trucks and the ATF there, explosive people, checking it all out. And first guy that they wanted to talk to was me, because I was very suspicious that I called in so calmly that a bomb had just blown up next to my house. And that's apparently not normal. So the lesson I've always taken away from that is, if you're going to call 911, act crazy out of control, because that's going to get you the best response.
Good advice. Good advice. What's interesting is that, like, obviously I've never been identified as a calm person. I don't think that's ever been on my list of words to describe me. However, Aaron has pointed out, and this is true, I am weirdly calm under pressure, like suspiciously calm under pressure. Maybe it is hereditary or something, because I am an absolute cyclone when I go through my daily life. But if something very serious is happening or really important, I'm just like I can zone out and get done what needs to happen. So I attribute that quality, I would say, to you. And that makes sense. I would want my pilot not to be freaking out. I want them to be able to think clearly and make a good decision and keep us alive, right?
Right.
Okay. So, Dad, you retired from flying, 3 years ago? 2 years ago?
Almost 3.
Almost 3 years ago.
When you turn 65, you cannot fly the big airliners anymore. Your license is invalid for that.
Yeah. And I know that Jean and I both won't let you fly the little airplanes with the advertisements behind them over the beach.
Yeah.
No, you're not allowed. Sorry, sir. So in retirement, something that I know you've done is, before it even happened, you were like, I want to be intentional with my time and with my life. And it's been really inspiring. So can you tell us a couple of things that how you've approached paring down your time and schedule and to-do list for retirement?
Well, I think some people approach retirement with, now I'll do all of my hobbies. I've kind of had a different approach. Is like, okay, there's some things that I just know I'm not going to do anymore. And why do I have all the setup for it? Why am I keeping it? And like right now is backpacking. I still have a backpacking closet down there, with little stoves and, all my kit that I would need in the backpack. My back can't handle humping around a 50-pound pack for, 3 days at a time anymore. I need to get rid of that. So I think just being honest with yourself about what you can and can't do anymore is probably the right answer. I mean, I threw away all my.
I have so many good memories of us backpacking together when you would take us on those hikes and we go camping overnight.
But but I'm just that's not going to be me anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's just good advice as a whole, right? It's like being honest with your life circumstances and your limitations. I mean, I feel like when you enter motherhood, even, or parenthood, you have to reevaluate what your life looks like at that point, and it might not support some of the hobbies or things that you've kept around your house.
That's right. And and we had a couple instances where Jean's relatives, or even, not so much mine, but have passed away, and the clean out effort is just horrendous. And what an awful thing to leave your kids and relatives to do, if you were a pack rat, that kind of stuff. So we're big about it. I want this to be so organized that it becomes easy for, when the truck hits us, that you guys don't have to spend a year getting all the garbage out of our house, So,
well, listen, I refuse to think about that, but also thank you.
Yeah.
Also, thank you. One of the things that you've done and been working on is pictures. How are you paring down and organizing photos?
Well, you have to know that nowadays, in the old days, you took photos and you just took one photo of something. Nowadays, you hold up the phone and you take 30 of basically the same thing, And so I have been going through each of the years, as you know, and right now, I'm on 2008, and I started with 6,300 photos. lots of which were repeats of each other or near repeats of each other, And so you go through and I get them down to about 300 or so. And then I take from that and I also make the best 50 so that you can put something, on each year and do a best 50. So I've done about 14 years and I think I have 10 years of these to go. So it takes a while to get through each year.
But I mean, with consistency, you've only been retired for 2.5 years. You've already gone through 14 years of photos. I think that's pretty good.
Right. So, and you have to sort of consider that in some ways, consider that a hobby too, something you wanted to do. I wanted always to be a life master at bridge. I play duplicate bridge, tournament style bridge. And so I got that one checked off. Jean and I are about to go to New Orleans. She's never been to New Orleans. It's always wanted to. So, you do have bucket list items, which are something you've added in retirement, but also project lists like the photos and baseball cards and stuff, things that, I really should have gotten organized with those a long time ago. And now's the time to do it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're not just like being like, maybe I will, that you're like setting goals. You're actually going after it, making it happen. By the way, after we are done recording, I need to find out when you're going to New Orleans. That's only 5 hours from us. And maybe we need to take our camper there, let the kids see you for a night and totally crash your New Orleans trip.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about it. So
he's like, absolutely not.
Yeah, I've already got my dinner reservations at Brennan's with Jean, in fact. So.
Oh no, I wouldn't dream of bringing our children into a public establishment to eat. That is just not. We don't do that right now. No,
on Bourbon Street, right, with the kids.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, we did actually take them. Remember on our road trip from Alaska to here, we went through New Orleans and we took them out to eat in New Orleans. It was fun. It was cute. But that was also back before they lost their minds. I feel like, listen, it goes through waves of like how difficult the three are, right? Like when I had 2 babies and a toddler, I was like, this isn't bad. This is good. And then like 2 toddlers and a preschooler, I was like, this is a little insane. And honestly, it's getting a little bit more insane right now when you have a kindergartner, a preschooler, and a toddler, because like the kindergartner and the preschooler just whine and complain about everything. And then the toddler is like a walking bomb. Right. And so I'm like, this is not a good combination, but I think in like 2 years, we're going to hit a sweet spot where like the older kids are able to like have a little bit more impulse control. I'm hoping for the best. I think we're in one of the hardest pockets right now. But anyways, this is not a parenting podcast to share with you. Your grandkids are crazy, Dad. Okay. The last question I'm going to ask you is something I ask all the guests on the podcast. I usually ask 2. I usually say, what are you paring down right now? And what's something you're looking forward to? But I feel like you just shared what you're paring down currently. So what is something you're looking forward to, Daddy?
Well, I think I keep saying that I want to really take up pickleball more. And, but I just haven't had the opportunity to really make the good friends with the right group of people that I can do this on a constant basis, especially since Jean and I travel so much, and then half time here, half time down at the beach house, and so I think though things like that you can help keep fit even at a later age is important, especially as I've added pounds around the waistline. I think it'd be good for me both mentally as well as physically, to go ahead. Okay, that's one more hobby. Yes, it is. It's adding more time. But it's something that, I really need to do to, replace other activities which aren't as good in my life. So.
Yeah. So looking forward to making that happen. I think that's great. I think it's good to look forward to feeling healthy. I'm feeling the same way. I'm trying to make sure that I feel good, especially with our cruise coming up this August.
Right.
Like, all right. Got to feel good. All right. Well, Dad, thanks so much. I hope that everyone feels a little bit more calm about flying, those of us who struggle with it, thanks to your insight. And also it's so interesting. I feel like I learned a lot about your background today. It was so much fun. So thanks for being willing to share your wealth of information.
Well, thanks for having me on, sweetie.
Love you. You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face, so thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at Paring Down Podcast, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.